Okay, here we go. We have another raw milk interview. We've got Premium Blend coming up on March 19th. That's this Friday if you're watching it before then. If you're watching this after then, that was a Friday before you're watching it now. We've got on Friday the 19th, welcome to the raw milk interview, by the way. We've got Constant L. Burts and we've got Premium Blend. I am so excited for this show. It's very it's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be our second full band with you guys, and you guys are you're a four-piece jazz band.
Yeah, it's a jazz quartet. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And then Constant is he's an MC, and I believe he's going to have a DJ. I hope that's the case. I think that would be ideal. But so welcome. Thank you for doing this. I haven't. I mean, I've seen you. I think I know you mostly in passing. I know we've had conversations, but I know that I've seen you. I know that I've watched you play. You're one of my favorites. I've seen you everywhere from outside at a place where people were playing cornhole, to the Chatterbox, to the I think I saw you at the Jazz Kitchen. I've seen you around, and I've never seen Premium Blend though live. So I'm really looking forward to this. I've watched some videos and things, but you guys have been around. How long have you guys been a band?
Man, I guess starting from the very first iteration of Premium Blend, I think 2021 makes 11 or 12 years that we've been fine tuning this machine.
Okay. And that's maybe I have seen you then. I just didn't know if I saw you as Premium Blend.
It kind of evolved, I guess. I mean, it initially it started with me playing at the Chatterbox on Sundays with my brother on trumpet. And then he went into his classical music direction, which has served him extremely well. And I kept honing the jazz elements. And so personnel's changed a couple of times in the past 11 or 12 years. And so now it's got its solid core four of myself on tenor, Ryan Taylor on guitar, and a composer as well, Stephen Jones on piano and keyboard bass, and a composer as well, and Brian Yard with also composes, plays drums, and just gives a little bit of extra rhythmic flair that helps sets our material off.
Well, and I think one of the things I really enjoy and I'm looking forward to about you guys is just the musicianship of everyone. And you were talking about everybody being composers and everybody, you have such an incredibly rich background in that band. Indianapolis is actually pretty well known for its jazz scene, so it's not surprising to me. I remember seeing the old cats at the Chatterbox back in the early 2000s. I guess is when I turned 21, and that's when I went to see them. Is when I was 21. But I don't think it's. I think everybody's picked up the torch. I don't think it's really faltered, or what's the word? I don't think it's lessened by any means, the quality and the professionalism and just the entertainment value.
Yeah, I mean it's never gone anywhere. Now the quote unquote like spotlight that may or may not have always existed, or the intensity of that spotlight that may have existed on Indianapolis Jazz, has definitely gone up and down over the past, I'd say 70 years. But no one ever was like, you know what, we don't want to play jazz music anymore. That's just not our thing. We don't have a sound. That's not what we do. It's always been a very integral component of the sonic fabric of this city, whether you realized it or not. From Melvin Rhine and Wes Montgomery and Pookie Johnson and David Young, David Baker, all these celebrated names, right? That this younger generation coming up may not have any kind of context or awareness of. So that's part of our responsibility as well. Just any jazz musician here in Indianapolis, it's part of our responsibility to kind of perpetuate and remind people of that rich history, while also making it accessible and applicable for 2021.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned David Baker. We've lost a lot of great jazz musicians, especially in the area recently. Well, it depends on what you consider recently. David Baker's in the past couple of years, I believe.
Yep.
and Jack Guilfoyle passed away. Um,
Melvin Ryan, Cynthia Lane,
Claude Simoneau
um, Claude Sifferlin. Yeah. I mean, these are just,
I've ever seen or heard in my entire life.
yeah, that
He was,
man was an absolute uh, cyborg genius when it came to interpreting and articulating the music.
oh, and his his chord structures, his voicings, they were like nothing I'd ever heard. And he was like a caricature,
Hmm.
playing. He was just a very tall man, and he just looked like a caricature, and his fingers were very long.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
luck
I mean,
trying to play any of his
that,
voices.
that man was born to play piano for sure.
And he played with Frank, right? Mostly.
Uh-huh. Frank Glover for sure. It was
Yeah.
just the two of them. I want to say on Wednesday evenings at the Chatterbox, and there's an art piece on the stage of a silhouette of Claude and Frank playing that's still up there today, which I think is really, really something else.
I guess I haven't. I don't even remember the last time I was in there.
It's been a full year since they've been open, which is really interesting to think about in the context of how long we've been dealing with this pandemic and what's opening, not opening, what's safe and what's not safe, and wherever people feel on that conversation. But to go for an entire year without such a um, training ground and communal meeting place uh, is something that, I just noticed it yesterday. There was like, it's 365 days since they've been open. I mean, it's the loss of that music there is definitely felt across the city for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys took the pandemic. I don't remember. Did you? Yeah, you started that video. You did a movie or something with somebody, right?
Yeah, over the summer of 2020, we were commissioned by the Indianapolis Jazz Foundation to come up with a project for the virtual Indy Jazz Fest, and we all decided to what we've coined the phrase a docu concert because it's concert, but there's documentary elements, and both of them together. I just like the word too. But it's not a full featured documentary, and it's kind of not a full featured concert. So we just focused on docu concert. We put that together, and that was released for Jazz Fest the last week of November. With Daniel Arthur Jacobson was our videographer. It helped us edit. Ryan Taylor produced it. It was a great experience. It was a lot of fun to keep music alive and be able to see people in a safe way while there was just so many things going on in 2020, and to put our own spin perspective on all of those social issues while still presenting the music and the story behind our music. So we were all really proud of it.
Yeah, you should be. It's really good. I've watched it a couple of times.
Thank you.
Yeah. So other than that, have you played out much?
Me, myself, I have not. I personally haven't performed in a live setting since the weekend before Christmas. I just made a personal decision to say that I'm just going to wait until either things open back up or things get a little bit warmer and do outdoor gigs, because that's what I was comfortable with. Some of the other guys have performed here and there as well, but it's not like it was a year and a half ago. I mean, none of us are really performing with the frequency that we're accustomed to. But we're getting back in it. There's the NCAA tournaments here in Indianapolis. So that's provided so many different opportunities for so many different artists, not just jazz artists. I mean, just pick a genre and that's who's going to be out performing in downtown. So I think this is a really fun way to get back in it, to have a live audience, to have a live element, and to just get back together and recapture that chemistry that we have playing together. Because it's been a minute. We got to see where we are and where we want to go, as far as that goes.
Well, and it's work too. I mean, like that's the thing is, I was having some technical difficulties, and I think a couple of things have popped up during this interview, so I apologize. We're upgrading. We needed to upgrade a little bit so that we could have you guys on and do what we wanted to do.
Nice.
Wanted to make it easier for ourselves, but I was man, we originally scheduled this interview for yesterday, and then the
Hmm.
power went out, and then we tried to do it today at 2:30. Well, we initially said 2:30, and then 3:30, and it's now almost 4:30. So we didn't even get started nearly on time. Um, Shoot, where was I going with this?
It's work. I mean, we're here. We make it work. We try to do what we can to alleviate any of the X factors that we have no control over, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It's stuff that, it's this is oh, I know what it was. I know what it was. I know why. Because when you were being extremely patient and I appreciated it, but you told me, you said, I'm just practicing, you know. So and so like it is something that we have as a passion, but it's work, and we work at it all the time, even when people don't see us doing it. And so it feels weird. I feel, even doing the stuff that we're doing here, I still feel incredibly out of work and out of place because I'm not running any live sound. Um, and I imagine you feel the same way. And I know that a lot of musicians have felt that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's a thing of, you know, are you a musician if you are you considered a musician if you have no place to play, right? The answer is yes. You know, um, and so it's been nice to bone up on some things and approach the music from some different angles and just, you know, knock the dust off for sure. And then there's also periods of time last year where it was just like, you know, I'm not touching my horn right now. I'm not feeling it, you know. And so just to kind of let it sit there for a little while, but to pick it back up, get familiar with it, to make a connection with it again, um, is something that is rewarding in and of itself. So days like today, days like yesterday, I just have my horn set up in the kitchen, and I've got Food Network on mute, and I'm just running tunes or playing long tones, and anywhere between like 4 and 6 hours a day, you know, off and on, just to keep that element of performance with me. That being said, you can practice all you want to. There's nothing like actually performing. That's, you know, you get one shot at it and that's it, and you have to develop. And so that's going to be an adjustment to get used to as well. You know, the preparedness is there. It's the execution that we all have to get familiar with again. And again, that's any kind of musician or artist or live artist that performs.
Yeah, and that's incredibly true. And I don't know. And the other thing is if you don't keep it up, especially with something like a saxophone or any of the wind instruments, you end up drooling all over yourself pretty quickly.
Which is where I was 2.5, 3 weeks ago. It was, it was, it was startling. It was just like, all right, I've put the horn down for long enough. My endurance isn't where it used to be. The muscles in my mouth aren't familiar. That certain many things that I do with my mouth that I may not be aware of to get a certain sound in a certain register weren't there anymore.
No,
It's my fault, you know. So
there's nothing like getting a cramp in your face.
and then you just feel that bottom lip just literally just give up, and you're done for a while. That's it, you know.
I had it a long time ago. I hadn't played in maybe a year or two, but I picked up a New Year's Eve gig because they lost their saxophone player for polka. I was like, I can do polka, no problem. An hour through it, I couldn't feel.
It
I mean,
hurts.
it wasn't like it hurt. It wasn't. It was just not there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
going is it was not fun.
So it's an endurance thing, you know, and that can only be remedied by just continuous reps. I mean, it's very much like going to the gym, conditioning or conditioning training for a marathon. You just have to keep putting reps on it and extending that time a little bit longer every time you do it. And before you know it, your body has an amazing innate way of correcting itself and just doing things that you just don't realize that you're aware that it's doing. So I'm glad to say that yesterday, today they were wonderful opportunities to just play and practice. And I feel like I'm back in fighting weight and fighting condition again.
I think I mean, I'm like I said, I'm really looking forward to this. It's been a long time since I've been in the room with a jazz band. Long
Me
time.
too.
Yeah, I imagine. But and speaking to that, you were talking about making the choice not to play out. Another thing is that for vocalists, for any musician, even drummers, lungs are super important. And not having, to catch this illness is very devastating to somebody who makes their living off of performing.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that I wasn't concerned. That's not it. I think every musician or artist had pick a day, and that concern was on a sliding scale. Some days you felt more comfortable, other days you didn't. And I think all of us had those moments. And so the decision wasn't to politicize anything or to follow whatever's trending as far as that goes. But I'm very blessed that my grandmother's still here, and she's very active and she's hilarious. And I want to see my grandmother when all this is over and done with. My parents, I want to see them. And so it was just kind of being cautious, not thinking about performance per se, but just as far as family and things away from the music that I value, that help influence the music, that I wanted to make sure I was doing my part to keep my people healthy and happy. And, all of us got irritated with it for sure. But yeah, it was just a time to just kind of sit and just not do that. And when the time was right, when I felt comfortable and when everyone else felt comfortable, and then we'd be back out there to do it. Everyone had to just wait, and patience is not a virtue that Americans in general possess. So
I would say not. I'm Indianapolis originally.
Yeah, I was born and raised here. I have a older sister, a twin brother, and my family all grew up in Indianapolis. My parents grew up in Indianapolis. My grandparents grew up in Indianapolis. So yeah, this has always been home for me. So we've just seen things change and develop a lot in my lifetime, and then hearing about my grandparents' lifetimes, my parents' lifetimes. There's been a lot of forward momentum in some areas, and just kind of a evolution or slowly evolving kind of energy that's been here in this city that I can actually now at 39 speak on and definitively be able to speak on from my past experiences.
Well, and you're now a part of it too. I mean, like you were saying, you're the generation.
It's cool and it's weird, because to me, I think a lot of us just see it as going to work or just contributing and doing what we love to do, but it definitely makes impressions on people even when we don't realize that it's happening. So I think about that very frequently, actually.
Yeah, it is very interesting thing. Is your family's musical, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, maybe not in career, but always in appreciation and value. They have been. My mother can sing beautifully, even though she never does. My father can play the flute pretty well for someone that's never had lessons. My late aunt was an artist. She was a student at Heron, and unfortunately, she passed away when she was 19. But she had won several competitions in the city for her artwork, and we didn't know any better. That's just kind of the house and family that we grew up in. I've got a bunch of cousins, and if they can't sing, then they know how to do sports and music. It just seems to be what our family did. So between visual arts and performing arts, that's just the way that we grew up. That was just the norm for us.
Yeah. So I don't know if a lot of people know this. Since Premium Blend is coming in on Friday, we did try to get the members of the band together, but it's tough to get all those people together. So you and I are doing the interview, but can you walk through kind of how your band forms? And is it a rotating cast? How does that work when it comes to maybe a jazz band that's different from a rock band that?
Sure. We've been really fortunate that, I mean, the clientele or the personnel hasn't really changed. Now you will have some of those moments where someone can't make a gig, so you find a sub, and that's, any genre, and especially in the jazz community, we're kind of a family that relies on each other and each other's availabilities and talents. So that happens. But I'd say for the last 8 years now, it's been what I call the core four: me, Ryan, Steven, and Brian. And the wonderful thing about that is that that allows us to actually develop a sonic thumbprint. We have developed a sound, we've developed a style, and it's all in part to all of us imparting ideas, advice, criticism, technique to all of these tunes. So I may write a piece, and I have a very distinctive writing style that perfectly complements Ryan Taylor's very distinct writing style, that complements Steven's writing style. I mean, all these things end up coming together where you can tell that there's more layers to this music, that there's not just one person contributing to this, that there's everyone's input and everyone's energy going into this to make it the most optimum and approachable and impactful piece of music that's possible. That's hard to do. I mean, only time allows that to happen and develop, and only time with the same individuals allow you to be able to do that. So it's gotten to the point now where you could go ask a Charlie Ballantyne, a Rob Dixon, a Kenny Phelps, who is it? They're like, oh, that's premium blend because it sounds like this, or this is what they do. And that's really important. I think any artist wants to be known for, to be able to be picked out of a lineup based off of what their sound is and what their makeup, sonically sounds like.
Well, and that's fantastic. One of the things I think people think of when they think of jazz bands is people playing other people's music, or they think that people are just making it up on the fly. Which I played saxophone, I played tenor mostly growing up, and I was in jazz, lots of jazz ensemble stuff, and I really enjoy it. And I never played anything that was an original. It was was a composition from any kind of commissioned or composition piece from anybody in the group. So yeah, that's a lot of what that is. And improvisation isn't just making stuff up on the fly. It comes from a lot of practice, and you are putting things together. You're putting ideas together and things like that. But I was just listening to A Train. I think it was on WIT 91.9. They played "Take the A Train," which is
Duke
Ellington, yeah.
Yeah.
But there was a guy from Indiana that wrote that, right? I'm pretty certain it was.
He wasn't from Indiana, but the guy that wrote so many of Duke Ellington's tunes was a guy named Billy Strayhorn.
Yeah, it was Strayhorn, yeah.
And the guy he's probably one of the most under-celebrated composers and contributors to what we now consider, jazz, the volumes of jazz standards. Lush Life was written by Billy Strayhorn, and the guy was super young when he was doing all of these tunes and arrangements for the band. And he would get the credit, not as much credit as Duke Ellington, of course, but Strayhorn he was a genius, but he's responsible for a decent amount of Duke Ellington's catalog, and specifically the very notable tunes in Duke Ellington's catalog.
Yeah. But that being said, you guys are playing your own stuff on Friday, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If we do, it's very important to play those standards because that's how you learn the language, right? Then after that, what's even as important, maybe to some people even more important, it's about applying what you've learned about that. And you can't do that unless you start writing your own stuff, taking a stab at doing it yourself. And again, it's taken about 6-7 years to be able to perform shows where it's pretty much strictly our own music. That takes years just because it takes a while to write, to perform, to practice, and then perform it at a high level. But honestly, it's great. We're at a position now that if we don't necessarily want to call a standard, we don't have to, because we already have our own premium blend standards, The other thing I like doing in other contexts, maybe not necessarily with premium blend itself, but I think it's important that we as Indianapolis jazz musicians start learning and playing other Indianapolis jazz musicians' music as well. That way these do become codified in the fabric of Indianapolis jazz music. So I'll learn tunes from Charlie Valentine. I'll learn tunes from Rob Dixon, and I'll throw them into a set, because the more that these people can hear it, the more it's going to be recognizable as what Indianapolis sounds like. So it's not a competitive vibe for me. It is a communal, let's get everybody's name out there kind of thing to me. So
Yeah, I think that's really important. You were mentioning more names. Mark Buselli. He's the only big band. I think there was one other big band that I knew of in town, but he was the big band in town. And I used to love to go. I didn't get to listen to them very much, but I used to love to go listen to them play. I think is he in Muncie right now? Is that where?
yeah, he's a professor at Ball State. I
Yeah.
want to say he's the department head of the jazz studies program. Yeah, I mean, he's a beautiful player. I got a chance to play with him again over the summer when we recorded at Garfield Park for Indy Jazz Fest. Great player, hell of a writer. You know,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
it's always things where I'm like, man, I wish I sounded like that. And I'm like, no, that's what he does. You do this. You know what I mean? But he's just, he's given me a lot of great advice. He's given me a lot of great criticism about what to change, what to stick with, what to expand upon, how to push further. And that means a lot to me, because I want no part with of the teaching aspects, I'd say, of jazz education, just because I don't think I'd be very good at it. But what I can try to work on is how I perform it, and then performing it with peers that are better than me, like Buselli, to be in the room and to have the stage and be able to do your best to hold your own with them and it be recognized. That's an invaluable experiences when they happen.
I think Dan, man, I hope I'm not getting this wrong. I know it's a story from a story, but Dan was telling me about when he was at Butler with Buselli, and he said Dan Dyer. I don't know if you know Dan Dyer.
Yeah, I do.
My
Drummer.
best friend. He's down in Virginia right now, but he told me that Buselli used to, acknowledge the audience, be all, talking and everything, and then turn around and raise his arms and go, "Don't fuck this up." And
I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it, because and he meant that too. Like, do not mess it up. I totally get it. I had a similar experience with the late Melvin Ryan. He was the organ player for West Montgomery. And Melvin passed away about 7-8 years ago. So I got to spend a decent amount of time with him. And to kind of make a long story short, I would go and sit in at the jazz kitchen, and he would be the organist or whatever. And I'd get up and call the tune. Melvin would leave the stage every time I got up on stage. I mean, he'd go to the bar, order him a Miller Lite or whatever, and sit there. And probably 6, 7, 8 weeks of me calling the same tune, just me expecting him not to be there. That last time, the same tune I'm playing and going through my solo, and I'm like, man, what is that sound? Melvin's at the organ playing. I'm like, all right, don't freak out, just focus. And I played my solo, and I get done, and I walk away from the microphone and go off the stage. And Melvin's just smiling and just does one of these, and he just looks at me. He goes, "That's all you had to effing do," and just starts laughing. And I'm like, I don't know what I did, but it was just one of those moments where he wasn't going to celebrate mediocrity. If it wasn't hitting, it wasn't hitting, So he didn't waste his time with that kind of stuff. But that was a really funny, invaluable memory that I have of him. And that's one of the original Indiana Avenue cats that I was privileged enough to even just be around, let alone trying to hack it,
yeah, would you say that that's probably the most, what's the word? The coolest, what's the coolest experience you've had playing with somebody where can you think of one?
Man, there's a lot, that was definitely one of them, just because that was a series of very hard but necessary lessons, and I got to meet and hang out with, I didn't play with him, but I got to meet and hang out with Branford Marsalis when he was here for Indy Jazz Fest I want to say this is 2008, 2009. This is when it was at White River.
Mhm.
State Park. Um, and it was amazing. I mean, this was a guy that I'd been listening to since I was a little kid and could actually figure out and distinguish what a saxophone was and the sounds it made. And it was really cool outside of being a Michigan State fan. I thought that was pretty awesome, you know? Um, but he gave a lot of really good impartial advice, you know, that was necessary and needed for a young developing artist. Um, Playing with Rob Dixon, I mean, I think his name gets used a lot just because he does so much. But if you go back to the context of maybe someone coming back here or moving here that does not know Rob and the reach that he has, or just the ability that he has, that first meeting and those first couple of meetings and just hanging out with him is always huge. I mean, I was a 22-year-old kid that thought he knew how to play until you meet Rob Dixon, and this dude is insane. You know, he didn't teach me by sitting down and having lessons. I never sat next to, you know, chairs side by side and go, we never did that. He'd invite me to his gigs, kick my ass on his gigs, and then meet up the next week for the next one. You just learned what he was playing, what he was not playing, what he was doing, what he was not doing. And that was huge, you know. So there's tons of other like cool moments, but I mean, every gig that you have where there's something to take away or something incredible that happens, I mean, that's a cool instance, you know what I mean? Just sometimes those memories surface some at other times than others.
I think I take it for granted sometimes knowing him.
I think a lot of us do. You know what I mean? It's a Rob Dixon thing where it's no thing for me to pick up my phone and be like, yo, Rob, what are you doing? It wasn't always like that, you know? And so unfortunately, I think familiarity can do that.
Well, and I don't know how familiar he is with me. I mean, I know that he recognizes me most of the time when I see him. I at least see that, but I don't expect him to. I've
Right.
learned out from him a few times, and I've watched him play, and I've admired and gawked honestly. But I've worked with him enough that I do sort of, I think I take it for granted that who I'm working with, and just the level. Cam Melton, my business partner here, he was really geeked out about the prospect of having you guys on actually, and then thinking, and we were talking about Rob Dixon. He's like, you think we could have Rob would come on? I was like, yeah, I mean,
he would.
which yeah, but then Cam, like I said, I just took it for granted. It's not that I don't respect and admire those cats that are playing. It's just it's Indianapolis. I've had some really, like, Indianapolis is just so rich. Even now it's so rich. But like we were talking about in the 2000s, it was rich. One of the coolest experiences I've ever had was it's kind of a long story, but I was in London, and my ex-wife and I, we were dating, and we were there, and we just kind of happened upon a place that I should have known the name of. I really should have, but I didn't recognize it. I didn't know the name, and we asked. It was Ronnie Scott's, is what it was.
Yeah.
I was 22. I mean, I still should have known it. Really should have. But we happened upon there because somebody said they could get us in, and we get there, and we couldn't get in for free. It was like 30 pounds or something to get in, and I was just blown away. And I said, well, who is playing? And the door guy, I think I remember it way more dramatically, like we're lighting, the door guy just in this awesome suit and hat or whatever, just not saying much and chuckling or whatever. But this is how I remember it for sure. But I do kind of remember him just nodding his head over to the sign, and it said Charlie Watts and his jazz quintet. So we threw the money down and we're like, yeah, we're going.
Yeah, for sure.
Those drummer, and hearing him play jazz, that's awesome. But his band played A Train that night too.
That's great.
The thing is that it was really cool and it was really good, and it was Ronnie Scott's, which is legendary.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that it beats out some of the nights that I saw Harry Miedema and Jack Guilfoyle, and I don't think it beats it out.
It's interesting. I've had the opportunity to play around this country, not a whole heck of a lot, or maybe as much as I would like to. But the moments that I did, they were pretty high profile gigs, or just great opportunities that are resume worthy, to be honest. Um, and one of the thoughts that always just kept ruminating in my head in some of these places, I mean, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, um, Chicago, um, where I'm just thinking that you'll go and you'll sit in, you'll just listen, and the music's great. It sounds awesome. But when you can just rattle off 6 or 7 guys in your head per instrument that I'd be like, yep, they could hang with this person, they could hang with that person, or they could, it's cool. And it's just people that we just happen to know with, yes, they're colleagues, but like, this is who comes over to the house for a barbecue sometimes, or there's no Stephen Jones in Austin, Texas. There's a Stephen Jones here in Indianapolis, and you'll be hard pressed to outplay that man stylistically, interpretively. Few and far between is that going to happen. Or a Zach Lapidus, which he lives in New York now, but nobody touching Zach when he was here. A Perez Whitted, which he's in Chicago and holding Chicago down very nicely. You'll be really hard pressed to best a lot of Indianapolis musicians that take this music seriously and seriously attack this music and getting better at it. So it's comforting. It's nice to know that it's, Naptown can hang with a lot of these big cities, a lot of them, like without question. It's not even a question for me.
Well, like I said, I'm excited. I hope to be able to capture it well enough that we can show them, people from those other cities can look and say, wow, okay. Because you're right. It's Indianapolis. It's sort of, it goes in and out of view, but it's never, I mean, sometimes there have been a few years, I feel like, when it was some growing pains because the old ones that we hung our coats on, our coats, what? Hopes? Old ones that we stood on, that they were the backbone of it, they disappeared. And so it was up to you and a lot of other people who, some of them have moved on, to New York or other places, but a lot of them are still here. And so there was a little bit of a growing phase, but I don't think I never worried that it was going to die out. It's always been strong. There are at least 4 incredibly good saxophone players in the city. And none of them, there's no competition in my mind. They're all different and they're all wonderful they're all wonderful human beings. And no, 5. There's at least 5, when I say incredible, I mean incredible.
It's everyone has their own thing. You know what I mean? Charlie Ballantyne and Ryan Taylor have 2 completely different approaches to this music. That's the point. You know what I mean? They don't try to edge each other out. They just play to the music in the way that they know how to, which is why Ryan sounds like the most incredible bebop into a modern sounding. He can take bebop to a modern sounding jazz quartet like Premium Blend and do it flawlessly. You can hear the lineage of the music and his playing. And I don't know too many guys that can do that. Charlie has his own lane that he has just stuck by, and I admire him the most for that, because that music resonates as well. So that's Charlie's style of executing that music. Joel Tucker, has his own approach to it, and he's got that virtuosic approach to it as well. And then you've got the elder statesman of guitar here in Steve Weekly, that none of these guys here, I think, would be able to develop their sound, or at least think about what they want to sound like, if they didn't have Steve Weekly as an example, not just as a person, but as how to develop sound and how to develop touch and feel, and be so generous with his advice and mentorship in that area. So it's pretty cyclical, in my opinion.
Yeah. We should probably wrap this up. I just we've been doing this for a while. We could talk about this forever.
We hadn't seen anybody in so long, man. It's good to talk to folks.
I especially haven't talked jazz in a long time.
Yeah.
It feels good. You were talking about having no interest in being on the teaching side of it. I had at least one saxophone instructor who I know had no interest in being on the teaching side of it. He was up in South. It was when I was in South Bend. He told me he was he once taught Sonny Rollins, which I was like, okay,
Wow.
that's cool. And then he gave me a C, even though I had a broken thumb, and I couldn't do my jury. And I thought, wow, I feel good about that. You know, that's either that or he just is like, you're nowhere near that level, so I'm not going to judge you as hard. But
No, I mean the education component. It's very, very important. I feel like I have way too many bad habits, or just gaps in my understanding, for me to have a position like that. You know, or being able to do something but not be able to explain it is good, maybe in a gigging scenario, but not in a classroom.
right,
You know, that's how gaps happen. That's how very important parts of the language get translated or mutated into something else that is the antithesis of what that music's supposed to be. There's a lot of accomplished men and women that are able to do that. So I'm gonna let them do that. And you know, my teaching just is not in a classroom. It's just kind of, I think maybe by example, good or bad. And then just always, I'm just a consummate student. Again, like the conversations that Ryan and I have had just about harmony and how much of it that I don't really understand is just incredible. And I love those conversations because I'm like, oh man, I just feel so stupid in this kind of stuff. But Ryan gives me a way to break things down easier, or hey, go to a piano and just plunk these chords out and listen to it over and over and over again, so you'll be able to immediately just pick it up by your ear. That's the kind of teaching that I like. And if I'm not able to do that, then I wouldn't want to step into that arena.
well, and there are other kinds of teaching as well. For instance, you're teaching somebody who might be watching this that thinks maybe I do want to do this for a living, and they hear it's not possible. They hear, they hear that it's tough. It is tough. It's not. It's the toughest job I've ever had, and I've had some tough jobs that were legitimately like physically tough, and but it's not about that. It's more about endurance and just knowing, and so a lot of the teaching I think that you and a lot of others provide for students is just that perseverance and that that passion for it. And even though, and not letting passion be the only driving force too. One of the best words of advice I ever got, and I think it was from Dan, and I'm sure he got it from somebody, was that if you want to make your living in music, you have to make it so that music is your only way of making a living.
That's hard.
Anyway, guys, and thank you very much. This has been a long interview, but I think it's been worth it. And I apologize for any of the technical difficulties.
Hey, we're good. I've enjoyed it. It's nice to, one, talk about music, but also be talking about performing it so soon, Yeah. So it's, we're excited. We're really looking forward to it. And
3 days off.
That's right. That's right. So thank you for having me. And the guys wish that they could make it, but between schedules and work and all that, it's gotten a little hairy, this past year, but the band's excited to be here, and just looking forward to getting back to what we're used to doing.
Yeah, we're honored to have you, and I think it's going to be an incredible show. It's a different show than we've had usually, but that's just I don't there's no real reason for it. It's just we started this out, and it was kind of what's the word? It wasn't so much like we wanted to pick who was on the show, and also there was availability, and also people were still being extremely careful when we started this so the idea of having a band in was frightening.
Yeah.
And then we started with a 3-piece punk group, which is amazing. And I figured if we can hold a punk band in here and make it sound good, I think we'll be fine with anything. So it was a good litmus test, and so I'm stoked. I feel really confident, and I'm excited to present this to anybody who is willing to watch and listen and to give. Normally, I've talked more in the interviews about where people can donate and where they can find your music. So, as we wrap up, where can people find your music? Where can people donate to help you guys keep doing what you're doing, and so forth?
Sure. So we've got 4 albums out now. And they're all on all digital platforms. So Apple Music, Tidal, the S word, Spotify, but anywhere that's Shazam, Pandora, all of that kind of stuff. We're all there. So the first album is called Soap, stands for Sum of All Parts. The second album is called The Road. Third album is called Vices. And we just released a few months ago the full extended performance from the docu concert. So the fourth album is called 38th and Postmodernism. So that's the most recent one. So if you guys would want to donate, Venmo, it's at Jared-Thompson-132, because we are kind of fundraising to get 38th and Postmodernism released on vinyl. We already have Vices out on vinyl, but just trying to keep this product moving, because that's going to be the biggest thing, that once we're able to start gigging more and getting on the road, product's going to be essential, since so many musicians have not had a chance to present anything, in a year or so.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. I think Josh is going to kill me for the link. Like I said, I think it was worth it. I'm looking forward to it. So, again, March 19th, if you're watching this later and you want to check it out, if you look up Milkman Recording Studios on YouTube and find the Raw Milk stuff, or you can go to milkmanrecording.com and click on the Raw Milk link. That's how you can check out this interview. If you're seeing this, I don't know why. Anyway, or the performances, Premium Blend performance for March 19th, 2021. My goodness. Jared, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.
And thanks again for watching, and have a good one. We'll see you soon.